Okay, so this is probably going to be a weird video. No music, no pictures, and all that. Similar to what I did with the Russell Westbrook John Wall video. So, this has been something that's on my mind as recently as a few days ago. So, the Heat Celtics game recently got postponed because a lot of players basically needed to quarantine because they were exposed to the virus. And as we all know, I think the rules say that you need to have like 8 players on the court in order for your team to play. And the Heat basically lacked those players. And it was getting pretty bad to a point that I think the Sixers only had 7 players on the court. And they only had one starter in that lineup, and that was Danny Green. Like Ben Simmons, Tobias Harris, Joel Embiid, and a few other pieces. They were not able to play because they were exposed to the virus and they had to quarantine. I'm also reading this off an ESPN article because I know the Mavs Pelicans game was also postponed and the Bulls Celtics game was postponed as well. I'm reading this off this ESPN source, link to the source below. As of Sunday night, there were 4 players for the Dallas Mavericks that tested positive for the virus, the newest addition being Maxi Kleber. Starters Josh Richardson and Dorian Finney-Smith already been ruled out, as well as backup Jalen Brunson. I'm paraphrasing here, by the way. Those 3 stayed behind in Denver after a win over the Nuggets on Thursday, and the NBA also called up Tuesday's game in Chicago between the Bulls and Celtics because of positive virus-related contact tracing issues type of thing. You get the whole gist. Another source from CBS Sports also listed the players from the Miami Heat that were basically sidelined because of health and safety protocols. Those players being Jimmy Butler, Bam, Dragic, Kendrick Nunn, Mo Harkless, Avery Bradley, the GOAT Udonis Haslem, KZ Opala, and then you have 3 players that are on the injury list, being Myers Leonard, Kelly Olynyk, and Gabe Vincent. So if y'all know where I'm going with this, I'm basically asking myself, and I know some of y'all are wondering as well, how the hell did they get the virus? Because these are pro athletes. Surely they would follow the rules. Surely they follow social distancing and mask wearing. Well, for one, these 2 teams are not in a bubble. So let's start with that. In a bubble setting, they had 0 positive cases within the end of July. I think it was like July 20th is when the pre-tournament games, or I guess you can say preseason games for the bubble. I don't know how you say it. Basically, the games before the seeding games. I think it was July 20th they started it, and then by the time it was October 11th, there were 0 cases, and that's because everybody stayed in one place. The only thing was is that you had players like Lou Williams that nearly messed up the whole bubble because he wanted to go to a strip club and get some lemon pepper wings. So that could destroy the bubble, but thank God, bro, that it did not happen. I think it also has to do with the fact that these teams are traveling from place to place for basically the whole season. The average NBA season is like around what 7, 8, 9 months, depending on how far these teams get in the regular season and in the playoffs as well. Some of these teams have to travel everywhere to get to certain points, and these states have certain guidelines to how they handle the virus. There are certain states that want to allow fans in the stadium, which does not help. I know Utah and Houston actually have fans that are visible, similar to what Tampa Bay has been doing. I'm talking about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the NFL, and then a few other teams are allowed to do it. Yesterday, with the national championship game, there was some fans in the arena too, and it almost looked packed too. Shout out Devontae Smith, by the way. That guy's a beast. But the point I'm trying to make here is that the closest thing that we've seen to fans being in the arena within the same capacity as we've seen with the Buccaneers and what we saw with the Alabama, come on, X, Alabama and Ohio State game, the closest thing we've seen to that was from the Houston Rockets. The only difference is that these games were held outdoors, the NFL games. And that we've seen according to Dr. Michael Osterholm from CIDRAP, who addressed this during the height of the Black Lives Matter protests, the virus actually dissipates into the air. And that's why we did not see spikes because of the Black Lives Matter protests. And it's the same thing with NFL games. Sure, there were some team outbreaks, but I really doubt it's because of fans being in the stadium. On the other hand, the virus actually spreads a lot more and poses more of a threat when in indoor environments. So the fact that these teams are allowing fans, I'm not totally against it, but they really have to consider that because the virus is basically spreading around like wildfire, and then it's there's no plan for it. There's really no national plan to combat this virus. All right, so I just got an update from Yahoo Sports. I'm gonna leave the following links down below. These guidelines are just as recent as per the NBA's news release, and I think Shams was the first one that reported this. So I'm not going to read the whole thing, but basically, players are to remain in their residence for at least the next 2 weeks, and they only interact with any household family members. Basically, players on the road are not allowed to go out for non-related basketball activities, and then individuals who visit a player or team staff's home for professional purposes must be tested for the virus for at least twice a week. And then players are restricted from arriving to the arena before tip-off, or in the video, or I mean, not in the video, in the article it says 3 hours before tip-off. And there's so much more to it too. So this makes me wonder what's basically next for the NBA. Because as Bezos pointed out, that not only players have been testing positive and they're doing all the contact tracing or what have you, there's also injuries involved. Spencer Dinwiddie and Thomas Bryant are the most recent ones, being out with the torn ACL, and obviously we know Klay Thompson is out with the torn Achilles. And then you have to take into consideration that these players have either been out for 2 months or 3 months because of the bubble, or 9 months because they weren't invited to the bubble. I sound like I'm rambling at this point, and I'm pretty much am. But if I'm being honest with y'all, bro, I'm gonna be answering my video question, or the title of this video at least. It's gonna be titled like, "What's next for the NBA?" And what I mean by that is, should the season shut down again? And should these teams be separated into separate bubbles? I would say it could if you can make it work. Now, what I mean by this is that back in March, when Rudy Gobert, as Flight Reacts would say, because I've been watching too much Flight, when he, Donovan Mitchell, and Marcus Smart all tested positive for the virus, Adam Silver was like, no, we're going to be shutting the season down until further notice. And then that's when they continued to talk ideas for the bubble, they being Adam Silver, as well as the NBA Players Association, obviously led by Chris Paul and I think Kyrie Irving too. They were all discussing, the bubble and how can it be safe and effective. And obviously at the height of the Black Lives Matter protests, it was just like, yeah, how can we come back but remind people that racism and the racial injustice towards black people is an issue in America? How can we keep that alive while playing the sport that we love for people's entertainment? So in that aspect, it works. And also because the season was basically shortened to like 8 seeding games, that's why the bubble is affected. But I think a lot of people did point out too that if you put these players in these bubble type scenarios for like 9 months, which is like the average NBA season, a lot of players are going to be affected by it. A lot of players in the bubble felt some type of mental health issues. Dwight Howard being one of them. Paul George, despite the fact that he lost, he was one of them as well. I do not doubt it, but even though I kind of do think he was using that as a scapegoat instead of taking responsibility. But I don't know, bro. It's a tough decision. What should I shut the NBA down if I were the commissioner? Man, this is a tough question because a lot of people, interestingly enough, were comparing this to the situation the NFL was in, meaning that the NFL had their team outbreaks and they were still able to play their games. But Well, that is an accurate comparison, and the NBA could go down that route. The only difference is that the NFL is playing 16 games and they play weekly. NBA players basically play every single day of the week. Almost the NBA is almost on 24/7 except on certain dates when it was like, the playoffs or something. The good news about this whole thing though is there is a vaccine for it. So Bezos pointed out that until all the players get vaccinated, the NBA season should come to a halt for now, and then wait until these players get vaccinated, which honestly does not sound like a bad idea. But the only problem is that the NBA already lost money because these players and the games and what have you, they basically went on a 5 month break. At least the teams in the bubble. The other remaining 8 teams had a 9 month break. So these teams already lost their revenue. And the NBA basically did lose revenue from that. So if y'all were looking for my answer to should the NBA shut the season down, um, to be honest, I do not have a definitive answer because there are reasons to shut the season down, whereas there are reasons to not shut the season down. And really, it's just depending on how the teams are handling this with the guidelines and how players are handling themselves, how players are being responsible. Because a valid argument is that if the NFL could work it out, then Adam Silver and the NBA can also work it out too. So I really don't have an answer for this. So I'm just gonna probably end it here. That's the end of this video. Be sure to check out my 2 previous videos on the Lakers and the Warriors because so far those are not doing as well as I thought. Please go check those out if you have the chance. Have a great day. Stay safe, everybody. And yeah, I'm X. Deuces.